Welcome to Lantern Voices, a podcast by Lantern Publishing and Media. The opinions and information expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Lantern Publishing and Media Incorporated. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lantern Voices. This is Lisa. I am your host for this episode. Today, we're going to talk to Jim Mason. He's a journalist, advocate, and a pioneering figure in the contemporary animal advocacy movement. We're talking about his book with Lantern called Unnatural Order. This book actually has a very interesting story. It was originally published in 1993 by Simon & Schuster, and then it was revisited years later in 2021 by Lantern. During our conversation, we ended up running into some technical difficulties, so we ask you for your patience in the first few questions. But I promise that as we move along with the interview, those issues were solved and the conversation was not compromised. One of the things that he mentioned in the beginning that unfortunately got lost due to those technical difficulties was the important role of Martin Rowe, Lantern's founder, in the publication of Unnatural Order, the revised edition, and in making sure that this book is still available to the public today. Here at Lantern, we pride ourselves to bring to the public books that wouldn't be on print in bigger publishing houses. Back in 1993, this was the case with Unnatural Order. Simon & Schuster had gotten the book, but unfortunately, they let it run out of print within the first year. This book is an important piece of work that connects the 80s and 90s to today and show how relevant it is, discussions that have been happening 30, 40 years ago to our current state of climate change, climate action, and animal rights movement. We hope you enjoyed this episode and stay with us until the very end for some special announcements. So now let's welcome Jim Mason to Lantern Voices. Hi, Jim. It's very nice to see you. Welcome to the podcast. I would like to start right away with our first question. Jim, you're an author and an attorney. In your career, you publish books and articles about factory farming, about preserving wildlife, and the importance of protecting non-human life. Among your books is the book we'll talk about today, Unnatural Order. This is a 2021 revised edition of the book you originally published in 1993. Can you tell us what was the spark that drove you to write this book in the early 90s?
Well, yeah. It goes back to 1980 when Animal Factories was finally published and released. And when the book came out in 1980, Animal Factories, I was relieved. I could breathe again. And I found myself really curious about farm animals. Where did they come from? Where did pigs and sheep and goats, how did they get to be in the barnyard? And I started reading up on what anthropologists call domestication, which is we call it the enslavement of animals that were taken from the wild and turned into sheep, goats, pigs, cattle, and so forth. So I started reading everything I could find about the domestication of the familiar farm animals. And I found a few books, and that led to more books and more books. And in the course of reading all of that throughout the 1980s, I realized that I needed to write a book that explained how domestication of animals has affected us, how it's affected our culture, how it's brought us ideas about superiority over nature, brought us ideas of male superiority over women. I found that patriarchy was one of the side effects of this enslavement of other animals. So I found so many insights from reading about this. I knew I just had to write a book. So that became An Unnatural Order, and it was originally published in 1993 by Simon & Schuster in New York.
That's fantastic. And then the revised edition came in 2021 with Lantern, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks to Martin Rowe, your founder.
That's awesome. And now, thanks to both of you, we have this amazing work that we'll talk about today. One of, if not the center topic of your book is the concept of dominionism. In the first chapter, you trace a history of cultural, religious, and philosophical arguments that have provided legitimacy that it is men's. Yes, men's. Although this is a term used as a synonym of humanity by some of the ancient and not so ancient names that you quote, I think it's important to use the gender term here as well, because it implies another layer of domination within the human species. So yeah, that's a term that's been used as a synonym of humanity and provided legitimacy to the argument that men are entitled to dominate the land and its inhabitants. Meanwhile, you bring the counterpoint of certain Native American societies and groups that are indigenous to tropical areas of the world, and how they had this idea that a human is just another type of animal, that humanity is part of a world just like every other animal, plant, or mineral, that the natural order is to coexist, not dominate. By the end of that chapter, you mentioned that advocates for dominionism still use naturality, quote unquote, as an argument to exert dominion over nature. That dominionism is humanity's only chance of survival as we face climate change, food crisis, health crisis, and other issues that were created by a dominionist culture in the first place. Why do you think this happens? How is dominionism so effective in justifying itself?
It's kind of a coincidence, isn't it, that God created us in his image, whereas everybody knows we created God in our own image to empower us to do whatever we want with the world. That's the birthplace of human supremacy and dominionism. It's a God given right to own the living world for our own benefit. And that's as simply as I can put it. And some of it comes from the Bible, from the first 5 chapters of the Old Testament, and some of it comes from the non-religious roots of our culture, like the Greeks and the Romans, the Persians and the Egyptians, and all of the other classical societies of the ancient world. They were all farmers. They all had livestock, pardon the expression, that is, captive animals, enslaved animals. So the worldview comes from several sources. Even the Far East has its own version of dominion, of human supremacy. Even Buddhism and Jainism, they're religious ideologies that were born during the agricultural period, also during the patriarchal period. So they don't get off the hook either. Basically, every religious view that has been written down so far is of the agrarian era and the patriarchal era, except for the belief systems of some indigenous people, like what remains of tribal peoples in North America, South America, and the other less exploited parts of the world where they still survive, perhaps some still in the Amazon rainforest. And fortunately, I hope their views of the world haven't been polluted by the Western religious worldview. We'll see. Hardly any of them are isolated anymore. They've all been touched by traders and gun dealers and liquor and everything else. So, yeah, so there are other worldviews out there, but they're dying fast. The Western worldview seems to have taken over because it's very popular to believe that you're special, that you're superior to everything. So the whole world really quickly adopted, as the Old Testament worldview of being entitled to use the living world for our own self-serving.
Yes. I think it's funny to me, at least. There are so many values and morals that our Western society carries that seem contradictory. I think you mentioned in the book about something how, oh, this action of controlling the environment, controlling nature is the only thing that's going to keep us safe. When we have seen over and over again that that's what's destroying us.
It's a bitter word, irony or paradox. I'll argue, but no, not graduate. There's a word for that kind of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
I guess is one of the words. We're doing the very thing that's destroying the world and yet defending it,
Yes.
the way we see the world. In the book, the new book I show you, I call Madness. I explain that I think we have to adopt a totally vegan outlook, which is to stop thinking of ourselves as separate and apart and superior to the living world, and see ourselves as just a member of the great family of animals.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It doesn't sound so radical when you put it this way, and yet.
Well, when I talk about it that way, it seems really far out in the stretch. Impossible to some people, but I'm active on social media. What's left of Twitter and new Blue Sky that there's an awful lot of support for this way of thinking.
Mhm.
So many people are vegan, not only in the food, but in the outlook that we're not special. We belong among the members of the living world and treat them like family. Quit slaughtering them and dismembering them for food. That should have ended a long time ago.
Mhm.
So, yeah, there's a lot of support for this idea.
That is great. That's great to hear. We know the vegan activist community is out there, and we want to connect with each and every one of you. We are proud supporters of initiatives that fight for a more compassionate world for all animals, humans and non-humans alike. For more content on vegan activism, follow Lantern on social media. We are Lantern Publishing and Media on Facebook, at Lantern PM on Instagram, and at Lantern PM Official on TikTok. Moving to my next question, can you talk a little about the mighty hunter myth? You mentioned the biases of modern society when early archaeologists and anthropologists studied primal human communities. Could the ideas of Eurocentrism and imperialism of the global north over the global south have something to do with this?
I think so. I think militarism and war as sport is woven into the Western worldview. Because when you look at the roots of our culture back in those tribal societies of the prehistoric Middle East, all they did was fight with each other over land. And my favorite example of this is the passages in Deuteronomy from the Old Testament, where it tells of the story of the Hebrews leaving Egypt, leaving slavery to go to the promised land. So they left the place where they were slaves and exploited, and they moved to this new space, which is now roughly Israel and parts of that part. They call it the Levant. It's the western end of the Mediterranean Sea. When the Hebrews landed there, they found that other people were living there, were settled there, farming. And in Deuteronomy, it tells how Moses commanded by God to wipe out these people. And the reason they needed to be wiped out is because they didn't worship God. They worshiped idols. They worshiped other deities. So God tells Moses, wipe them out, every single person, but you need to keep the livestock. It's in the book. It's in the holy book. And by the way, let's don't single out the Hebrews to say that they were the original bad guys. Closely at the anthropology of that period in that area, everybody was killing each other off
Mhm.
because agriculture was getting successful. And there was a lot of competition for cropland and grazing land. And so it must have been a bloodbath, in the centuries or millennia before history begins in 3000 BC.
You talk about agriculture evolving and everything. Agriculture seems to be the turning point towards dominionism in Western human history, according to what I've read in your book. Is it really like, did I understand that right? And do you believe it is possible to have a society that it's not dependent on agriculture after 10,000 years of relying on it?
Well, I think we'll have to have iron to agriculture.
Uh-huh.
We have to have food. And it will be plant-based food because we realize we no longer need to raise animals to be killed and distributed for food.
Mhm.
That was probably an accident during our evolution. And real quickly, my sketchy theory is that when we were leaving the forest of Africa and became dwellers in the open plains, the savannas they call them, we walked around erect on hind legs and looking for food. Probably saw other animals killing and leaving the remains of the kills. And we probably saw scavengers like hyenas going after that for food. So if we were in an environment that was foreign to us and was new to us, and we didn't know how to find all of the nuts and berries, it might have occurred to some people to follow the model of the hyenas and the other scavengers and actually try some of this dead animal flesh. And then at about the same time, they discovered fire, so they learned to cook it. So this is very sketchy, and there isn't any proof of it, but it seems logical to me that we started eating meat because we saw other animals doing it. So yeah, there's a lot of theories as to how it got started. But for the first few million years of our evolution as hominins, we were living as apes, essentially vegans. The most powerful, physically powerful of all the apes is the gorilla. And guess what? The gorilla eats. The gorilla, the gorilla does not eat animal products. The gorilla leaves and shoots and maybe plants. So they must be doing something right.
I remember, again, not a doctor. My sources are limited in this aspect, but I remember reading years ago hypothesis that the appendix, that it's virtually useless in our body now, used to be an organ that would process cellulose and other like vegetables, because that was primarily what we used to eat.
That's right. As we came out of African forests, when we began to live on the ground and wander around in the open spaces, the savannas they call it, we probably had to look for whole new kinds of food sources. We weren't living off the jungle anymore. We were on plains, really, wandering around looking for food sources. So, yeah, there's a lot of theories about how that happened. But the first several million years, we still lived, ate pretty much the way our ape ancestors, our common ancestors ate, which is the way gorillas and chimpanzees eat today, primarily plants.
Interesting, yeah.
But then we stumbled upon eating the flesh of other animals. And actually, that enabled us to travel all over the world because, if you just eat plants, plants are specific to an ecosystem. So you can't move to, say, Arctic regions or desert regions, live off the same plants that you did back in the jungle because those plants aren't there. But when we started eating meat, it probably enabled us to travel just about anywhere because animal flesh is pretty much the same the world over. And it's a sad fact of evolution that eating meat probably enabled us to spread everywhere where we don't belong. The uninhabitable areas of the earth are now inhabited by humans.
Nowadays, with the infrastructure that we have and the way of society we created, we usually refer back to our origins and how evolution happened. But again, nowadays, it is not, we don't like living in the north of the country, close to the poles and everything. Still, we get shipments of food, we get access to vegetables, we learn technologies of like create greenhouses and cultivate food, plant food. Point is, we're not living in caves and needing to kill animals to survive anymore. It's my argument usually when I'm talking to people about this. We don't need it anymore.
Well, I have to say, I'm amazed at how vegan thinking, vegan living has taken off. When I finished writing Animal Factories in the late 70s, it was barely talked of. There was a vegan society, and I did go to some of their summer meetings. There were very few vegans, and there weren't vegan restaurants and cookbooks yet. You could count the vegans that I knew on one hand. But look what it is today. I mean, it's just exploded. And that's only, 40 some years. So, we must be doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, definitely. I've been seeing this whole shift into more conservative ideals lately, at least on my bubble in social media, which concerns me. But every time that I get the data in the end of the year from I think it's from the Vegan Society with international. I'm forgetting their name, but there's this vegan society that checks the number of vegans and vegetarians in the world every year, and it's still a growing curve. So that's still very encouraging, even though we see people trying to claim Paleolithic diets as just eating animals.
When I first heard of it, it was like not even taken seriously, except by a handful of people. And the Vegan Society, of course, took it seriously, but it wasn't as popular, well thought of as it is now.
Mhm.
So it really has spread, and I think it's surely the wave of the future.
Mhm.
No doubt about it now.
When I was reading your book, I learned a new word, misothory. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes. Rhymes with misogyny.
Yes.
It's the model for the word.
Uh-huh.
Misogyny, the hatred of women, is from Greek words, two words meaning hatred and women.
Hmm.
And so I thought, we need to have a word for this hatred of animals because it's a very real thing. It's animals, the word animal is used disparagingly. Look it up in the dictionary sometime.
Yes.
And we'll say it's an insult, like when we have a serial killer who commits a particularly heinous crime, the press invariably calls the person an animal. And it's like I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. Animals don't do those things. Animals kill for some animals, not all animals. Some animals kill others for food, but they don't do serial killing and mutilation and rape and torture, the things that human beings do. So I thought we have to have a word similar to misogyny, which is a real thing. It's an ideology that demotes women. It takes away their power, their status, their dignity. The social standing is reduced by this attitude that women are horrible, dirty, filthy, ugly creatures. So the same happens with animals. They're thought of as beneath us. So I found the root words for animal and hatred, and it came out as zothily.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm getting a lot of teasing in the movement about this word. Nobody knows how to pronounce or spell, but it's a real thing. It is an ideology that goes with our human supremacy that helps us look down on other beings, just the way men look down on women as an other, an inferior being, makes them feel superior. And we do that with animals.
Do you love new books? Do you need more titles about veganism, animal rights, and climate activism on your bookshelf? Then go to lanternpm.org and check out all our books and ebooks available for purchase. You can find anything from beautiful illustrated picture books that introduce children to the values of compassion for our fellow animals, to thoroughly researched nonfiction books that give you all the facts to help you live a healthy vegan life. Go to lanternpm.org and explore all of our books today. What are the consequences of seeing animals as less than?
Well, we lose it's our loss because we lose our sense of belonging to the world. A lot of intellectuals of the 20th century has written about, and they use the word man's alienation from nature, the feeling of loneliness, the feeling of despair on the planet, of seeing kind of a dark future for us. And Sigmund Freud wrote about this. Most of the members of the Frankfurt School, Eric Fromm, Walter Benjamin, a lot of the major intellectuals of the 20th century talked about our malaise, a feeling of uneasiness in the world. And it's because of this authority. It's because of our separating ourselves from the membership and the kinship with the life out there that we were brought up with and around. We used to identify with them. So we used to see them as brothers, sisters. If you look at the belief systems of the tribal peoples, even the few that survive today into the century, like what's left of the Native American tribal people, they still have the remnants of this view. And some of them have what we call totemism. They see some animal out there as the ancestor of the tribe, and they look to that ancestor for guidance for how to live in the world. And they have a sense of membership, a sense of belonging, and a sense of peace of living in the world, unlike the rest of us, supremacy, like we're separated from the rest of life. We don't feel comfortable. We don't feel at all. It's a lot to digest. It's heavy intellectual stuff, but I discuss it in some detail in the book Unnatural Order. And it's something to really think about, that if we could see ourselves as members of the living world, it'd be happier.
When I was reading this part, it clicked to me, like it reminded me of a social media trend that was going on a while ago that was talking about, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling depressed or anything? Before, like, go talk to your therapist, but before you take any medication, try stepping outside a little bit, like touch some grass, look at the trees, and then see how you feel after that. And if you're still bad, then yes, go find like medical help. But if not, maybe all you need is some therapy and be in contact with nature.
This is how we were brought up, so to speak. That's how we evolved.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes say, it's a very shorthand thing, that enslavement is not good for the soul, whether we enslaved other people. And by the way, we should know the first slaves, the first humans to be enslaved, were women.
Mm-hmm.
And this occurs in the prehistoric Middle East. They were captured along with the livestock of the enemy tribe. And again, read Deuteronomy. It says, when you conquer the Midianites or the Ammonites or the Hittites, take their livestock, and you may take the young girls along with the livestock. And they were turned into slaves. There's a lot of anthropology on this. This isn't just something I made up. This is something that you can read about in the anthropology of that period. First slavery was slavery of women and girls. And I think, and I argue in the new book, that became the model for human slavery. Since they enslaved animals, they thought, well, if we're going to take the livestock, we might as well take the girls along with them. And then it became easy to enslave women. And the next thing you know, they're enslaved. So by the time we get to Greek society and Roman society, slavery is an institution. Like one out of four people in the population was enslaved. And they built all the stuff that we admire about those glorious cultures, the Greek temple, the Parthenon, the sculptures, slaves.
This is shocking. It's shocking. When I read in your book about this, the first slaves being women and like considered part of livestock, I didn't know about that, and I was just very, very much shocked. I had to take a break.
That needs to be known and understood. That's how old slavery is. We talk about the early enslavement of women and girls occurred even before the Bible was written. It occurred probably before the Sumerians, probably before 3000 BC. So that by the time, I argue and I maintain that by the time history begins in Mesopotamia, there was already systematic enslavement of not only animals but girls and women as well. So that when Western civilization has its birthday, we're already a slave society.
Yeah, that is definitely a lot to digest. And for listeners who are who read the book, who are thinking about reading the book, I suggest to, like, when you get to this particular chapter, it's like middle through the end, to take some time, sit with that information, digest it a little bit, because for me particularly was one of the hardest chapters to go through.
Well, there's a lot of talk today about intersectionality and all the intellectuals that have dream jobs teaching university, the intersection of racism and sexism and so forth. What I tried to show is that they have a common root, in agriculture. And I think the anthropology that I've read, and I have references in the book, patriarchy, the idea of male superiority, probably grew out of the animal enslaving cultures. They call them pastoralists, people who live off of herds. And the Hebrews were one, and the Greeks were another, and most of the ancestral cultures that fed Western civilization had domestic animals, mainly sheep, goats, and cattle, and eventually horses. So they had an enormous influence on the beginnings of Western culture. And I believe, and I argue in the book, I get the details why it was those people who kept herd animals that were probably the first male-dominated patriarchal cultures. They had a huge influence on Western society.
In the end of your book, you talk about the kinship model. Do you think it could be a long-term solution for a less domineering world, or just the first step?
I think what we've done, as I recall, my learning curve was that we always found ways to distinguish humans from other animals. Oh, we have technology. They don't. Oh, we have speech. They don't. We were always looking for some way to make us separate and apart, disconnected from the other animals. That is damaging. And I say, stop doing that. What we need to do is recognize how much we have in common with other animals.
Mm-hmm.
I was a biology major. That's one of my degrees. It's in biology. And I tell people, just study some biology. It's elementary. Darwin's theory of evolution. We evolved from animals specifically. We have a common ancestor with the other apes. This is science.
Mm-hmm.
We are animals. We have the same kind of heart, liver, lungs, organs. Skeleton is basically the same. We belong with our kinfolks, the other animals, even though they can't speak, even though they don't feel. Mm-hmm. We have so much in common with them. Those of us who live with animals, if I have my beautiful kitty cat that I get beside me, they're delightful. They're good companions. They show affection. They like to be touched. They enrich our lives. And I think we'll emphasize what we have in common rather than this stupid pursuit of trying to show how we're different from other animals. That's the dead end. Yeah.
That's very clear message.
Really think about our kinship. I sometimes find myself daydreaming about how I might have, if I'd been born some other iteration, like in the savannas of Africa, like, 200,000 years ago, what my life would be like. We were living naked. We were living outdoors. Probably didn't have class structures of dominant groups controlling other groups. We were probably just a family and looking for food.
Grew up in south of the equator. I grew up in Brazil, and it is still pretty much, I feel, the same as the United States in that aspect, unfortunately. Although other instances, at least some kids like myself, I think we were privileged to grow up in a school scenario, in a situation that was taught to us how to know the nature around us. So I had environmental projects as a class when I was in school, and our class time was literally just going into the stretches of forest that we had around our school and learn about the trees, learn about what is safe to touch and to eat, what it's not, that grows up in our region. But also about, it was a Christian school, it was a Franciscan school, so they were very emphatic about treating animals and nature as siblings. At the same time, though, they never encourage a vegan lifestyle, so it was a bit of a dissonance in there. Although for me, that definitely contributed to going vegetarian very early in my life because of the things that I learned in school and the way that I felt after that reality was introduced to me. I was always trying to make sure that in my head things were coherent. And when I learned that and I could resonate with this connection that I was being taught at school, yeah, I could not continue to consume animals. It just didn't make sense in my head.
Yeah, the learning curve. The new book that I mentioned briefly called Madness. That's the title. You can get it on Amazon. It's a very small book. It's only 100 pages. But what I try to do in that book is explain how the farm boy experiences of doing cruelty, what it did to me as a human being. My first exposure to farm work was slaughter day when we were slaughtering pigs in the backyard. And it freaked me out something terrible. I told it was traumatizing. And my mother told me years later that I was uncontrollable that day and they had to take me to town because I was a 4-year-old kid and I saw this thing and it appalled me and scared me and shocked me into oblivion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was a big insight for me. Like, there I am, child, it's not even verbal yet. And I see this, and it's terrible to see that. But then as I get older and I become acculturated, and I go to church and I integrated into the family farm work, cows, plucking chickens, all that work, little by little, I'm imbued with the farm culture, the, the idea that animals are property,
Mm-hmm.
that I shouldn't have that reaction, that I shouldn't be upset by killing animals because that's what we do. That's how we live. And little by little, that childhood innocence was replaced with this feeling of, well, yeah, we're entitled to do this. God says this is okay. So even though it makes you cringe to think about it now, and I think cruelty to the animals makes most people cringe unless they're mentally ill. That ought to tell us something. If we can't comfortably look at the cruelty and torturing of animals, to me that tells me that we have empathy for animals that's been suppressed, that's been derailed by animal agriculture and this belief, this misogyny that's been stuffed into our head. So I think that we ought to recover that. I think that we've got a natural empathy in there that's been hiding all these years. That's why most people are appalled when they see cruelty. I think that's one of the things that we do as vegans is try to reveal that, try to unbridle that empathy that's in us. And that makes me somewhat hopeful for the human species to believe that, yeah, we have empathy down there, but we hide it.
Mm-hmm.
We're firing it with this belief that we should kill and eat animals.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say it's destroying our soul.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners? You mentioned that you have a new book that just came out. Do you have any books, projects, or any message that you would like to share?
My mission in life has been, for the past 4 years, has been getting across our enslavement of animals for the purpose of food, milk and eggs. I guess my first work was with Peter Singer, Explosive Factory Farming, book Animal Factories. Mm-hmm. And I've been harping on it ever since. So the time that I have left, I'm 84 years old now, I'm going to harp on one thing, which is that animal slavery has hurt us. It's hurt our souls. It's hurt our culture. Now, we know it hurts animals. There's no debating about that. It's cruel to our animal friends, and it's cruel and damaging to our environment. And what I'm trying to persuade people, it's bad for us too. It's bad for our souls. It's bad for our outlook on the natural world. And it makes us feel lonely and unhappy living here. So we need to reconnect, revive kinship, revive our empathy, find it. It's in there. It's not hard. And changing your diet is definitely a way to start.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those words. And thank you for being here with us. This was a great interview.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Us too. That was amazing. And to all of our listeners, I will add on the podcast description the link for Jim's new book and the link for Unnatural Order. So you can check it out, his work and everything he's been up to all these years. Thank you, Jim, very much. It was a pleasure to have you.
Okay. Anytime. I love talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. This was our interview with author and animal rights advocate, Jim Mason. Thank you very much for staying here with us for this episode of Lantern Voices. And if you're already a podcast listener, thank you for staying with us through all of these episodes this year. If you're like me, you enjoy listening to podcasts about books, and then you go immediately after the book to find it and read it for yourself. That is great news for our listeners because we have a special discount coupon that is active at the moment at our ebook store. It's 25% off any ebooks ever featured here in the podcast. We just organized our ebook store a little bit better. So if you go to lanternpm.org and click on ebook store, you'll see on the left-hand side a little menu with many categories that our books fit in, but also a category called podcast. In there, if you click over there, you see all the books that were ever featured here on Lantern Voices. And if you go right now, you get some spoilers actually of future books that will be featured here in the podcast. Any of those books, if you use the coupon Lantern Voices 25, they're going to be 25% off. So go to lanternpm.org, click on our ebook store, select podcasts, and select any of those books. And on checkout, use the coupon Lantern Voices 25. That's Lantern Voices, just like the name of the podcast, and the digits 2 and 5. All together, no space. As we approach the summer, we want to step outside, get some fresh air, and enjoy nature a little bit. So throughout the month of July, we're going to go through a brief pause here in the podcast, and we'll be back with new episodes in August. So during the month of July, we're going to have a little pause, but here on the feed, we will recommend some podcasts that our amazing authors are participating out there. So you'll still be able to check episodes with our authors and to learn more about them, and maybe get to know a few new podcasts about animal rights, the vegan movement, climate activism, other topics that are relevant for our readers and our listeners, and you're probably going to have a great time enjoying it. And then we'll be back in August with 2 brand new episodes. Thank you very much for joining us here. Stay tuned to our social media to learn more about the podcast, about the books that Lantern is putting out there, author events, and much more. Follow us on Instagram at LanternPM. We're also on TikTok at LanternPM Official, and Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube as Lantern Publishing and Media. Follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and we talk again in August. Enjoy your summer, step outside, go see some nature, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.